The storm hit the docks just as she stepped off the ferry. Rain slicked the wooden planks and turned the horizon into a wall of gray. To anyone watching, she was just another drifter. A woman in a weathered leather jacket, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, boots clicking against wet wood with the steady rhythm of someone who'd walked through worse. But her eyes told a different story. Eyes like that didn't wander without purpose. They'd seen things that left marks deeper than scars. They'd watched good men die. They'd made choices that haunted the space between heartbeats. She walked toward the naval checkpoint with the same calm stride one might use walking into a grocery store. Except her destination wasn't for the faint-hearted. Naval Base Coronado, home of the United States Navy SEALs. The rain intensified. Thunder rolled across the Pacific like artillery fire. She didn't quicken her pace, didn't seek shelter, just kept walking, one boot in front of the other, toward a place she'd sworn she'd never see again. 7 years ago, she'd walked through these same gates for the first time. 21 years old, fresh out of BUD/S training, selected for something that didn't officially exist. She'd been so young then, so certain the world made sense, so convinced that doing the right thing mattered. The woman walking toward those gates now was 28. The 7 years between felt like 70. Her name was Thorne Ashford, call sign Phantom, and she was about to prove that some ghosts refused to stay buried. Security noticed her immediately. A civilian trying to access restricted military property, that was always suspicious. But this one had something else about her. Something in the way she moved. The way her eyes tracked every vehicle, every patrol route, every sightline without seeming to look at anything at all. The young guard at the checkpoint had been on duty for 6 hours. Rain soaked through his poncho. His boots squelched with every step. He'd been looking forward to the end of his shift, to hot coffee and dry socks. Now he had a problem. He stepped forward, hand resting on his sidearm. Not threatening, not yet, just ready. "Ma'am, stop right there." She stopped. Rain ran down her face. She didn't wipe it away, didn't blink against the water streaming into her eyes, just stood there, waiting, like she had all the time in the world. "This is a restricted area. You need authorization to proceed." Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her jacket. The guard's hand tightened on his weapon. His training kicked in. Threat assessment, distance calculation, response options. She produced a military ID card, worn at the edges, laminated surface scratched from years of use. She held it out between 2 fingers, steady, no tremor. The guard took it, studied it under his flashlight. The photograph matched, but the date didn't. His frown deepened. "This ID expired 3 years ago." He looked up at her. "Ma'am, I need you to—" "Check the credentials," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, the voice of someone who'd given orders under fire, who'd made life and death decisions while bullets cracked overhead. "Then call your CO." Before he could respond, 2 military police officers approached from behind. Their boots splashed through puddles. Their hands rested on their sidearms. One of them whispered something into his radio. His expression hardened, changed. The professional courtesy evaporated like morning fog. "That's enough," the taller MP said, gripping her arm. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for impersonating a naval officer, specifically a Navy SEAL." He pulled out handcuffs, metal gleaming in the rain. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." She didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't explain. In fact, she almost looked relieved as they cuffed her hands behind her back and led her toward the security building. Young recruits stopped to watch, female recruits mostly, running morning PT in the rain, their faces curious, judgmental. One whispered to another, loud enough to be heard, "Stolen valor, pathetic." The woman in cuffs heard it. Her jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near her eye. But she kept walking. Some truths were too classified to defend. The interrogation room smelled of bleach and damp concrete. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look sick. Steel table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, one-way mirror taking up most of the back wall. Thorne sat in the chair facing the mirror, hands still cuffed behind her back. Water dripped from her jacket onto the concrete floor. Drip, drip, drip. The only sound in the room besides the electrical hum. She counted the drips, measured her breathing, controlled her heart rate. 72 beats per minute, same as always. She'd trained herself to maintain that rhythm under any circumstance. Gunfire, explosions, the slow creep of hypothermia in Arctic water, the screams of dying men. A room full of skeptics was nothing. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, steadied. She studied her reflection in the one-way mirror. The woman staring back looked older than 28, harder. The softness of youth worn away by years of living in shadows. Behind that mirror, people were watching, making calls, running her fingerprints through databases, trying to figure out who she really was. Let them look. They wouldn't find what they were searching for, not in any system they had access to. Her records had been erased by people with the authority to make individuals disappear from history. She'd been dead for 4 years, officially anyway. The door opened. Commander Vance Hollister entered, 48 years old, 26 years in the Navy, 20 of those with the teams. He had the look of a man who'd spent his youth doing things that aged him faster than the calendar suggested. Gray threaded through his buzz cut, lines around his eyes from squinting through rifle scopes in desert sun, hands scarred from rope work and breaching charges, a slight limp in his left leg, probably shrapnel, probably Afghanistan or Iraq. He carried a file folder, thin, not much in it. He sat across from her, set the folder on the table, didn't open it, just studied her for a long moment, taking in the details. The way she held herself despite the cuffs, the controlled breathing, the stillness that wasn't nervousness but complete self-possession, the slight callus on her right index finger, trigger finger, the faded scar running along her left forearm, knife wound, defensive. "You're telling me you were a SEAL?" His voice carried the particular skepticism of a man who'd earned the trident and knew exactly what it cost. Every drop of sweat, every moment of agony, every friend buried in Arlington. She met his eyes, didn't blink, didn't look away. "I'm not telling you anything, Commander. I'm waiting for someone with the clearance to have this conversation." Hollister's jaw tightened. The muscle pulsed beneath his weathered skin. "We've checked every record. There's no female on any SEAL team roster during your claimed service years. None. Not one. That's because those records are classified beyond your clearance level." Convenient. He leaned forward, fingers laced together on the steel table, knuckles white with pressure. "You know what's funny? We get wannabes all the time. Guys who read books, memorize some lingo, buy surplus gear on eBay, maybe even get a fake trident tattoo from some parlor in San Diego." He paused, let the silence stretch. "But you didn't make a single rookie mistake in your terminology when they processed you. Knew the right codes, the right protocols, the right way to stand when they put you in cuffs." He studied her face, looking for cracks, finding none. "That's impressive, but impressive doesn't make it true." She said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the one-way mirror, to the shadows moving behind the glass. Someone was making a phone call. Someone important. She could feel the shift in the room's energy, the way the guard by the door kept glancing at his radio. Good. The wheels were turning. Hollister opened the file folder. "Says here you claim to have completed BUD/S training in 2017. He looked up. "Walk me through Hell Week." "No." His eyebrows rose slightly. The first crack in his professional composure. "Excuse me? I'm not performing for you, Commander. Either get someone with appropriate clearance in here, or charge me and let JAG sort it out." Hollister's eyes narrowed. The room felt smaller suddenly. 2 wills pressing against each other like tectonic plates. neither willing to give ground. You're facing federal charges. Impersonating a military officer is serious. Stolen valor carries penalties you don't want to think about. I know exactly what the penalties are. Her voice remained level, almost bored. 5 years maximum federal prison, dishonorable discharge equivalent for civilians, loss of benefits, permanent record. She tilted her head slightly. I also know you're stalling while someone runs my biometrics through classified databases. Facial recognition, fingerprint analysis, probably cross-referencing with DIA and CIA records by now. Something flickered in Hollister's expression. Uncertainty. Surprise. How long until they hit the firewall? She asked. She'd touched a nerve. His hand moved to the folder, then stopped. A tell. Let's try something else, he said. You want to prove you know what you're talking about? Fine. He gestured to the wall behind her. A framed photograph showed a SEAL team in full combat kit. Desert background, faces blurred for operational security. Standard team photo, standard propaganda. The rifle in that photo. Tell me about that weapon. She didn't turn to look. She'd already cataloged everything in the room within seconds of entering. Every exit, every weapon, every potential threat, every potential tool. HK-416, 10.4-inch barrel, gas piston operating system, approximately 7 pounds unloaded, 30-round magazine capacity with standard STANAG configuration. She recited the specifications like reading from a technical manual she'd memorized years ago. With that AAC suppressor, you're looking at sound reduction from 167 decibels to approximately 140. Still loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage without protection, but quiet enough to maintain auditory awareness in close quarters, critical for room-clearing operations. Hollister's poker face cracked just slightly, a hairline fracture in his professional skepticism. The suppressor also reduces muzzle flash, she continued, which matters more than the sound signature in night operations. Enemy can hear suppressed fire, but they can't see where it's coming from. That buys you seconds, and seconds are everything. Lucky guess. The ammunition in the standard loadout for that configuration is 5.56mm MK262 Mod 1. 77 grain open tip match. Muzzle velocity around 2,750 feet per second from that barrel length. Optimized for barrels between 10.5 and 14.5 inches. She leaned forward slightly. The cuffs rattled against the chair. Better terminal ballistics than M855 green tip, especially at ranges beyond 300 meters. The open tip design fragments on impact, creates larger wound channels, higher probability of incapacitation. Her eyes locked onto his. That specific ammunition was classified during those years, Commander. The civilian market didn't have access to performance specifications until 2019. Even then, only partial data. She held his gaze. Let the silence speak. So either I memorized highly classified technical data from sources that would themselves be classified. She paused. Let him finish the thought himself. Or I used it. Hollister stood abruptly, chair scraping against concrete. He walked to the one-way mirror, stared at his own reflection, at whoever was watching from the other side. Who are you? He asked quietly. Someone you don't have clearance to know about. He turned back to her, frustration bleeding through his composure. Everyone leaves traces, records, documentation, medical files, training evaluations. If you really were a SEAL, there would be something, somewhere. There was. Her voice carried weight now, finality. Then it was erased, deliberately, completely, by someone with the authority to make people disappear from history. Why? She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, heavier with memories she'd spent years trying to bury. Because sometimes the missions matter more than the people who run them. Because sometimes the only way to protect an operation is to bury everyone involved. She paused. Because dead operators don't ask questions, don't give interviews, don't write books, don't testify before Congress. Her eyes met his. And officially, Commander, that's exactly what I am. Dead. Have been for 4 years. Hollister opened his mouth to respond, but the door opened before he could speak. A younger officer stuck his head in, face pale, eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Commander, you're needed outside, now. The urgency in his voice made Hollister move. He glanced back at her once before leaving. The door closed with a heavy, metallic thud. Thorne sat alone in the room, listening to the rain against the window, counting the drips of water from her jacket, breathing slowly, evenly, the way she'd been trained, the way she'd survived. 4 years of hiding, 4 years of running, 4 years of watching and waiting and gathering intelligence, piece by painstaking piece. It all came down to this room, this moment, this gamble. Either they'd believe her, or she'd spend the next decade in a federal prison. Either way, the clock was ticking. Somewhere across the world, a man she'd left behind was running out of time, and she refused to let another teammate die while she did nothing. The door opened again. This time, the man who entered changed everything. The room seemed to shrink around him, not because of his physical size. He was average height, lean build, the kind of frame that came from decades of disciplined PT rather than gym vanity. But his presence was something else entirely, a storm contained in human form. He wore the service dress blue uniform, crisp, perfect, not a single wrinkle despite the rain outside. His ribbons could have filled a wall, silver eagles on his collar gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the weight of command in every deliberate movement. Rear Admiral Conrad Latimer, 64 years old, 42 years of service, a career that had taken him from the teams to the Pentagon and back, from Cold War Berlin to the deserts of Iraq, from the halls of power to the shadows of black operations. A man who'd made decisions that saved lives and cost them, who'd sent young men and women into places where they might not return, who carried those choices like stones in his pockets. Every single one, every single name. The MPs who'd followed him in snapped to attention. Hollister, who'd re-entered behind the Admiral, stood rigid, barely breathing. Latimer's eyes locked on the woman in cuffs. His face betrayed nothing. 42 years of command had taught him how to wear his expression like armor, how to absorb shock without flinching, how to receive devastating news without blinking. But something flickered in those eyes. Recognition, memory, something that might have been grief. At ease, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. The kind of voice you didn't question, didn't argue with, just obeyed. Not because of rank, because of the man behind the rank. He looked at the MPs. Remove the cuffs. Hollister stepped forward, professionally concerned. Sir, she's... Do it. The command broke no argument, left no room for discussion. One of the MPs moved forward, keys jingling. The cuffs clicked open. Thorne brought her hands forward slowly, rubbing her wrists where the metal had left red marks. She didn't take her eyes off Latimer. He walked around the table, stopped directly in front of her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room held its breath. The rain continued its assault on the window. The fluorescent lights hummed their electric hymn. The air itself seemed to thicken. Stand up. Not an order this time, a request. From one soldier to another. She stood. Roll up your left sleeve. Her jaw tightened. This was it, the moment that would either validate everything or condemn her as the fraud they thought she was. She unbuttoned her cuff, rolled the sleeve up slowly, past her wrist, past her forearm, to just below her elbow. There, inked into her skin, was a tattoo that no faker would dare replicate. Not the standard seal trident that thousands of operators wore with pride. This was different. unique, modified in ways that would mean nothing to civilians, but everything to those who knew. A trident, yes, but with 7 small stars arranged around it, each one representing something that couldn't be spoken aloud, something that had been buried so deep that even acknowledging its existence was a federal crime. The inkwork had been done by hand, not in a shop, the lines slightly uneven, the shading imperfect, the kind of tattoo given in field conditions, with improvised equipment, under circumstances that left no room for artistry, only necessity. Admiral Latimer stared at it for a long moment. His hand, steady as stone for 4 decades, trembled slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That tattoo is authentic." Hollister blinked, stepped forward. "Sir, what are you saying?" Latimer looked at him sharply, the full weight of his rank and experience in that gaze. 42 years of command, thousands of decisions, hundreds of lives, all of it focused into a single look that made Hollister take an involuntary step backward. "I'm saying this woman isn't impersonating anyone, Commander. She is who she says she is." He turned back to Thorne. "Her name wasn't on any official roster because the unit she served with doesn't officially exist. The missions she ran were never authorized by Congress. The operations she participated in will remain classified for the next 75 years. He reached out, fingers hovering over the tattoo, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin, but not quite touching. "I gave her this tattoo myself, 8 years ago, in a medical tent outside Damascus, after a mission that officially never happened." His voice cracked just slightly. "After she pulled one of her teammates out of a compound while under heavy fire. After she watched 2 other teammates die." The room was absolutely silent. Latimer stepped back, looked at Hollister. "Clear the room. Everyone out. Now." The MPS left immediately. Hollister hesitated, looking between the Admiral and the woman, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Commander," Latimer said, "that means you too." Hollister left. The door closed behind him with a heavy, metallic thud. Admiral Conrad Latimer and Captain Thorne Ashford stood facing each other. 7 years and 1,000 unspoken things between them. Latimer pulled out the chair across from her, sat down heavily. Suddenly he looked every one of his 64 years. The armor of command falling away, leaving just a tired old man carrying too many ghosts. "I thought you'd never come back," he said quietly. She sat down across from him. "I wouldn't have, if I had a choice." "What happened?" She reached into her jacket, slowly so he could see she wasn't reaching for a weapon, produced a small, waterproof envelope, slid it across the table. Latimer opened it. Inside were photographs, satellite imagery, intelligence reports printed on paper instead of viewed on classified networks. The kind of intel that came from sources that couldn't be officially acknowledged. His face went pale as he studied the images. "That's not possible," he whispered. "We confirmed. You confirmed. You confirmed what they wanted you to confirm." Her voice was steady, but underneath it ran a current of something else. Pain, guilt, determination. "I've been tracking this intel for 18 months, piecing it together from fragments, intercepts, sources I developed in the shadows." She tapped one of the photographs, a grainy image of a prisoner being moved between buildings, emaciated, beaten beyond recognition. But visible on his forearm was the edge of a tattoo, a trident. "He's alive, Admiral, and he's in enemy hands." Latimer stared at the image. His hands shook as he held it. "Garrett Calloway," he said. The name came out like a prayer, like a curse, like something he'd tried to forget and failed. "Facial recognition is 73% match despite the physical damage," Thorne said. "But I'd know him anywhere. That's Garrett. We thought he died in Syria, in the extraction. The compound collapsed and you never recovered a body because there wasn't one to recover. They took him, Admiral. They've had him for 4 years." She pulled another document from the envelope, handed it to him. Colonel Viktor Volkov, 52 years old, former Spetsnaz, now runs a black site intelligence facility near the North Korean border. Specializes in extracting information from captured Western special operators. Latimer studied the photograph of Volkov. Hard face, cold eyes, deep scar running from his left eye to his jaw. The kind of man who viewed human suffering as a professional tool. He's broken 3 of our people over the past decade, Thorne continued. Navy SEALs, Delta operators, CIA paramilitary, men who swore they'd never talk. Men who believed they could withstand anything. She paused. Garrett has held out for 4 years. 4 years of whatever Volkov could throw at him. That's unprecedented, and it's driving Volkov insane. How do you know all this? Because I've spent 4 years becoming a ghost, building networks, cultivating sources, doing the things that Project Sentinel trained me to do, except without any official support, without any backup, without anyone knowing I existed. She leaned forward. According to intercepted communications, they're done being patient. In 14 days, they're going to transfer him. She let that sink in. That's their way of saying they're going to execute him and dump his body where no one will ever find it. Latimer set down the photographs, ran a hand over his face. For a moment, he looked lost, overwhelmed by the weight of what she was telling him. Then he straightened, the weight of command settling back onto his shoulders. "What are you asking me, Captain?" "I'm not asking for anything, Admiral." Her voice was hard now, determined. "I'm telling you what I'm going to do. With or without your help. With or without your permission." She held his gaze. "I'm going to get Garrett out. An unsanctioned rescue mission into hostile territory. Against an enemy that's been preparing for exactly this scenario." He shook his head. "That's suicide." "Probably. If you fail, it'll expose Sentinel. Everything we did, every mission, every operator still alive. They'll all be compromised, targeted. I know. If I help you, if I provide resources, personnel, support, it'll end my career. Court-martial at minimum. Prison at maximum. Everything I've built for 42 years. Gone." "I know." She paused, let the silence stretch between them. "That's why I'm not asking you to help, Admiral. I'm asking you not to stop me." Latimer stared at her, seeing the 21-year-old kid who'd walked into his office 8 years ago, eyes bright with idealism, convinced she could make a difference. Seeing the 28-year-old woman standing before him now, forged in fire, tempered by guilt, hardened by determination. "I erased you to protect you," he said quietly. "There was a purge coming. Politicians wanted Sentinel buried. Everyone involved. I had a choice. Sacrifice everyone or save who I could." He met her eyes. "I chose to save you, to let you disappear, to give you a chance at a life outside of all this. And I've spent 4 years in hell because of it." Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion she'd shown since entering the room. Latimer stood, walked to the window, stared out at the rain hammering against the glass. "Do you want to know the truth? The real truth?" She waited. "I didn't just erase you to protect you. I erased you because I couldn't face what I'd done." He turned to look at her. "I sent your team into that mission knowing the intelligence was questionable. I prioritized the objective over your safety. And when Cole died, when Prophet was captured, when you came back broken," his voice was raw now, honest in a way that command rarely allowed, "I couldn't live with having you around as a reminder, so I erased you because it was easier than looking at you every day and remembering what I'd cost us all." Silence, heavy and profound. Thorne walked over to stand in front of him. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried steel underneath. "Then help me fix it. Help me bring Garrett home. Not because it'll absolve us, not because it'll make the guilt go away." She held his gaze. "But because it's the right thing to do. Because we owe him. Because no one else is coming for him. Latimer looked at her, really looked, saw the determination, the fire, the same qualities that had made her exceptional 8 years ago. He thought about his career, 42 years of service, the ribbons on his chest, the respect of his peers, everything he'd built. Then he thought about Garrett Calloway, 32 years old when he'd been captured, 36 now, 4 years of torture, 4 years of holding out, 4 years of waiting and hoping that someone would come. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. If we do this, he said slowly, it stays completely black. No official authorization, no backup, no rescue if things go wrong. He paused. Just us, and whoever I can pull together without raising flags. I understand. You'll be operating without support, without extraction guarantee. If you're captured, I can't acknowledge you exist. I've been operating that way for 4 years. Latimer extended his hand. Then let's bring our man home. She took his hand, felt the weight of the commitment, the promise, the oath. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet, Captain. We might both hang for this. She almost smiled. Almost. Some things are worth hanging for. Latimer held her hand for a moment longer, then released it. Get yourself dried off and fed. Meet me at Building 7 at 2200 hours. I need to make some calls. Pull in some favors. Find us a team. She nodded, started toward the door. Captain, she turned back. For what it's worth, I never stopped believing in you. Never stopped thinking about all of you. Every single day for 4 years, I've wondered if I made the right choice. If I should have fought harder to keep Sentinel alive, to protect all of you. Thorne looked at him, saw the weight he carried, the guilt that mirrored her own. The past is done, Admiral. All we have now is forward. Forward, he agreed. She left. The door closed behind her. Latimer stood alone in the interrogation room, stared at the photographs spread across the table, at the evidence of 4 years of suffering, at the reminder of what his choices had cost. He pulled out his phone, started making calls. Each one burned a bridge, called in favors that couldn't be repaid, set in motion something that would either save a life or destroy everything he'd ever built. Outside, the rain continued to fall. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Neither did they. Thorne walked out of the security building and into the rain. The storm had intensified, wind driving the water sideways, lightning splitting the sky over the Pacific, thunder rolling like artillery fire. She stood there for a moment, letting the rain wash over her, letting it wash away 4 years of running, 4 years of hiding, 4 years of waiting for this moment. Garrett was alive. The words repeated in her mind like a heartbeat. Garrett was alive. For 4 years, she'd carried the guilt of leaving him behind, of choosing to save herself, of watching the compound collapse and assuming the worst. But he hadn't died. He'd been taken, tortured, held in a hell she couldn't imagine, and she was going to get him out. She started walking toward the temporary quarters, past the training facilities, past the obstacle course where she'd broken her ankle during BUD/S, and kept going. Past the pool where she'd almost drowned during drown-proofing and refused to quit. Past the memories of who she used to be. The base was quiet at this hour. Most personnel in the mess hall or their racks. Just the guards on patrol. The instructors running another hell class through the surf. She could hear them. The screams. The splashing. The instructors' voices cutting through the wind. You want to quit? Ring the bell. Get wet and sandy. The only easy day was yesterday. She stopped, watched the silhouettes in the surf. Candidates barely visible through the rain and darkness. Being broken down to be built back up. She'd been one of them once. Now she was something else. Something that didn't have a name, didn't have a record, didn't officially exist. A ghost. And ghosts had work to do. 14 days. That's all the time they had. 14 days to plan a mission, assemble a team, insert into hostile territory, Extract a prisoner from a black site designed to prevent exactly that. 14 days before Garrett Calloway disappeared forever. Building 7 came alive at 2200 hours. The structure sat at the far edge of the base, away from the main training facilities, the kind of building that didn't appear on official maps, where briefings happened that never made it into reports, where decisions were made that Congress would never vote on. 3 men waited in the shadows when Thorne entered. She felt their eyes on her immediately, assessing, judging, deciding whether she was worth following into hell. The room smelled of coffee and gun oil. Maps covered every surface. Satellite imagery pinned to corkboards. Red string connecting locations like a conspiracy theorist nightmare. Except this conspiracy was real, and the stakes were measured in human lives. Admiral Latimer stood at the head of the table. His presence anchored the room, gave it weight and purpose. He changed out of his dress blues into tactical casual, dark pants, black polo, the uniform of someone preparing for operations that couldn't be acknowledged. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is Captain Thorne Ashford, call sign, Phantom, former Project Sentinel." He paused. Let that sink in. "She's the mission commander for this operation." The words hung in the air. Mission commander. A woman. Leading SEALs. Thorne watched their reactions, measured them, filed them away. The first man stepped forward into the lamplight, 41 years old, medium build, weathered hands that moved with the careful precision of someone trained in trauma medicine. His eyes were intelligent, analytical, and deeply skeptical. "Petty Officer First Class Elliot Reeves," Latimer introduced. "Combat medic, 2 tours Iraq, 3 Afghanistan. If someone gets hit, he's the one who decides if they live or die." Reeves studied Thorne with unconcealed doubt. His arms crossed over his chest like a barrier, like armor against what he was seeing. "No offense, ma'am," he said, "but I've never operated with a female SEAL, mainly because there aren't any, at least not in any record I've seen." The room tensed, waiting for her response, testing how she'd handle the challenge. Thorne met his eyes calmly. No anger, no defensiveness, just steady confidence. "Then let me show you why I'm still alive after 8 years of doing things that should have killed me." She moved to the table, pointed to the medical kit laid out among the equipment. "Combat trauma, sucking chest wound. Walk me through treatment." Reeves's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being tested, especially not by someone a foot shorter and 60 pounds lighter. 3-sided occlusive dressing. Seal 3 sides to allow air to escape but prevent entry. Why 3-sided? To prevent tension pneumothorax. Seal all 4 sides. Trapped air collapses the lung in under 90 seconds. Correct. Now tell me the field expedient alternative when you don't have a chest seal. Reeves paused. This wasn't textbook material. This was field knowledge, the kind you learn by doing. Thorne continued without waiting. "Cellophane wrapper from an MRE packet, 100-mile-an-hour tape. You can create a functional chest seal in 15 seconds." She picked up a roll of tape from the kit, turned it over in her hands. But here's what they don't teach in medical school. You have to apply it during exhalation. Time it wrong, tape it during inhalation. You trap air in the pleural space. Patient dies anyway, just slower. She set down the tape, picked up a tourniquet. TQ7 windlass design. Standard application is 6 inches above the wound, but in winter conditions, hypothermia becomes a factor. Do you place the tourniquet over clothing or against skin? Reeves thought. Against skin, better pressure application. Wrong. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Winter operations, you place it over the clothing. The fabric provides insulation. You expose skin to apply a tourniquet in sub-freezing temperatures. You're adding frostbite trauma to bleeding trauma. Patient goes into shock faster. She held his gaze. "I learned that in Norway, winter of 2019. My medic went down. Bullet through the femoral artery. I had to work on him while suppressing enemy fire with my offhand." She paused. Let the image sink in. He lived because I understood the variables they don't put in manuals. Reeves stared at her. The skepticism in his eyes slowly transformed, grudging respect replacing doubt. Where'd you learn field medicine like that? Same place I learned everything else. Doing it under fire when the person bleeding out is someone I'd die for. She held his gaze. I'm not asking you to like me, petty officer. I'm asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing, that I've earned my place on this team, and that when things go sideways, and they will, I'll make the calls that keep us all alive. Reeves was quiet for a moment, processing, recalibrating. Then he nodded slowly. Fair enough, I'm in. The second man stepped forward, 38 years old, lean and rangy, the permanent squint of someone who'd spent years looking through rifle scopes. His movements were economical, controlled, the mark of a professional who measured everything in millimeters in seconds. Chief Petty Officer Cade Sullivan, Latimer said, Scout Sniper, 87 confirmed kills. If you need someone dead at 1,000 meters, he's your man. Sullivan's eyes were cold, professional, the eyes of a man who'd learned to disconnect emotion from action, who'd watched hundreds of people die through his scope and slept fine afterward. Let's talk ballistics, Captain. Thorne almost smiled. She'd been waiting for this one. Your preferred caliber, .338 Lapua Magnum. Projectile weight, 250 grain Sierra Match King. Ballistic coefficient, .670. She moved to the map, pointed to the target compound. We're inserting here, 4,000 feet elevation, winter conditions. Estimate 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Your primary overwatch position will be approximately 400 meters from the compound. 15-mile-per-hour crosswind from the west. Target is moving at approximately 3 miles per hour. She looked at him. Calculate your hold. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. This was the real test. The mathematics that separated amateurs from professionals. The calculations that meant the difference between a clean kill and a miss that got your team killed. At 400 meters, drop compensation is 2.1 milliradians. He spoke slowly, working through the variables. But at 4,000 feet elevation, air density is roughly 10% less than sea level. That reduces drag, flattens trajectory. Actual drop is 1.9 mils. Thorne nodded. Keep going. Wind deflection at 400 meters with 15-mile-per-hour crosswind is approximately 1.2 mils right. But we need to account for the Coriolis effect at this latitude. He paused, eyes distant, running the numbers. Northern hemisphere, target moving east to west, add .1 mils right. Temperature? Temperature is critical. Standard ballistic tables assume 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Every 20-degree drop reduces muzzle velocity by approximately 1%. 30-degree ambient means 40-degree differential from standard. 2% velocity loss. He looked at Thorne. That adds roughly .2 mils to the hold. Total calculation? Total hold. 2.1 mils up, 1.5 mils right. Lead the moving target by .3 mils. First round probability of hit, 87%. Thorne's smile widened. You forgot one variable. Sullivan frowned. The confidence in his eyes flickered. What? Powder temperature. She let the words hang in the air. Your ammunition has been sitting in sub-freezing conditions for the 12-hour insert. Cold powder burns slower, reduces muzzle velocity by an additional 3%. Your actual hold needs another .3 mils elevation compensation. She held his gaze. Without that correction, you're hitting low. Might wound instead of kill. In our operational environment, wounded enemies create more problems than dead ones. They scream, they call for help, they compromise the entire mission. Sullivan stared at her. Then slowly, grudgingly, his expression changed. Respect replacing skepticism. Damn, he said quietly, you've done this. 87 shots, 87 hits, different circumstances than yours. Same physics, Same math, same understanding that details matter more than talent. Sullivan extended his hand. I'd be honored to serve with you, Captain. She shook it. The honor is mine, Chief. The third man stepped forward, 34 years old, built like a boxer, compact and powerful. His hands were scarred from years of working with explosives. He moved with the careful confidence of someone who understood that one mistake could vaporize everyone in a 50-meter radius. Senior Chief Petty Officer Weston Kane, Latimer introduced. Breacher, explosive ordnance specialist. Doors, walls, vehicles, if it needs to open, he makes it happen. Kane didn't test her, didn't challenge. He just stood there with something approaching reverence in his eyes. I heard about Phantom, he said quietly. Urban legend in the teams. Operator who could move through hostile territory like she was invisible, who made impossible shots, who brought her people home no matter what. He paused. I thought you were a myth. I'm honored you're real. Thorne studied him. Something in his voice didn't quite match his words. A tremor underneath the respect, a darkness behind the eyes, a weight he was carrying that had nothing to do with this mission. Thank you, Senior Chief, but I need to ask. His expression darkened, the reverence fading into something harder, something personal. Syria, is it true you left men behind? The room went silent. Reeves and Sullivan tensed. Latimer's hand moved slightly, ready to intervene. Thorne met Kane's eyes directly. No flinching, no deflecting. Yes. The word fell like a stone into still water. Lieutenant Cole Harrison and Petty Officer Dominic Shaw. Cole died protecting me from an RPG. Prophet was captured because I chose to extract Chief Calloway instead of staying to fight for him. Her voice was steady, but the pain underneath was evident, raw, honest. I've lived with that decision every day for 4 years. I dream about it every night. I wake up and the first thing I think about is whether I made the right choice, whether I could have saved them both, whether I should have died trying. She held his gaze. So yes, I left men behind, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Which is exactly why I'll never do it again. Why I'm here. Why I'm willing to risk everything to bring Garrett home. Her voice hardened. Because I understand what it costs to leave someone, and I won't pay that price twice. Kane held her gaze for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, recognition, a darkness that mirrored her own. Then he nodded. That's good enough for me. I'm in. Latimer stepped forward. We're all in. Now let's plan how we're going to do the impossible. They gathered around the table, 4 operators and an admiral who just committed treason. Maps and satellite imagery spread before them like a battle plan drawn in 2 dimensions that would be fought in 3. Thorne took point. This was her mission, her plan, her responsibility. For the next 12 hours, they refined every detail. Halo jump parameters, infiltration routes, extraction timelines, contingencies stacked on contingencies. By the time they finished, the mission lived in their bones. Now all they had to do was execute it, and pray the mathematics held when theory became bullets and blood. 12 hours of planning had refined every detail into muscle memory. Now, at 2,200 hours, they stood in the C-130's cargo hold. The theoretical had become real. Maps and calculations transformed into parachutes, oxygen systems, and loaded weapons. Thorne sat closest to the jump door. The plan lived in her mind now, not as briefing slides, but as choreographed violence. 18 minutes, 28 inches, 80 kilometers, numbers that meant life or death. The aircraft's engines droned at a pitch that made conversation difficult. Not that anyone was talking much. This close to the drop, words felt superfluous. Each person lost in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own understanding of what they were about to attempt. Thorne ran through the plan again in her mind. Every detail, every contingency, every second of the 18-minute window mapped out like choreography where one misstep meant everyone died. She thought about Garrett, wondered what 4 years of captivity had done to him, whether he'd still be the same man she dragged out of Syria, whether the torture had broken something fundamental, whether he'd even be able to walk when she found him. Didn't matter. She'd carry him if necessary, drag him if that's what it took. She hadn't come this far to leave without him. The loadmaster appeared, making his way down the hold. He gave the 10-minute signal, time to pre-breathe pure oxygen. Each operator connected their oxygen hose. The flow started. 4 liters per minute of pure O2, flushing nitrogen from their bloodstream, preventing the bends, preventing hypoxia, preventing the 100 ways that altitude could kill you before you ever reach the ground. Thorne checked her equipment one final time. Altimeter, green. GPS, green. Reserve chute, green. Primary chute, green. Oxygen flow indicator, green. All functional. All ready. She looked at her team. Reeves methodically checking his medical kit, organizing supplies by priority, the way he'd done it 1,000 times before, muscle memory and professional discipline keeping the fear at bay. Sullivan test-firing his rifle's action, ensuring the cold hadn't seized the mechanism. His movements precise, economical, the mark of a man who'd made this weapon an extension of his body. Kane checking his phone again, quick glances, thumbs scrolling, then pocketing it with hands that trembled slightly before he steadied them. Something about Kane still bothered her. Had bothered her since the briefing. The way he'd hesitated when asked about Syria. The way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. She pushed the thought aside. Too late for doubt now. They were committed. The loadmaster returned. 5-minute warning. Red light illuminated above the jump door, bathing everything in crimson. Like the inside of a heart. Like being swallowed by something vast and hungry. Final equipment check. Each operator inspecting the man next to him, looking for loose straps, disconnected gear, anything that could fail. All green, all ready. 3 minutes. Thorne stood, moved to the jump door. The others formed up behind her. Single file, ready to exit on her signal. The loadmaster opened the door. The world exploded with sound and wind. The slipstream tore at her, trying to rip her out before she was ready. Temperature inside the hold plummeted. 40 degrees below zero outside. The kind of cold that didn't just chill, it burned. She looked out into darkness. 28,000 feet below, the earth was invisible. Just blackness and stars, and the thin line of horizon where the two met. She was about to fall into nothing. 2 minutes. She thought about Cole, the way he'd stepped in front of that RPG without hesitation, the way he died so she could live. She thought about Prophet, his last words, his last look, the forgiveness in his eyes even as she left him behind. This jump was for them. This mission was for them. 1 minute. The loadmaster held up one finger. Thorne's hand went to her chest, checking one last time that her ripcord was accessible, that everything was secure, that nothing would fail when gravity took over and physics became the only law that mattered. 30 seconds. She moved to the edge, toes over the ramp, wind screaming past, the void calling. The light changed, red to green. Thorne stepped into nothing. The wind hit her like a physical thing, tore the breath from her lungs, spun her for half a second before training took over. She arched, stabilized, arms out, legs spread, falling at terminal velocity toward an earth she couldn't see. 1001, 1002, 1003. Behind her, 3 more bodies tumbled into the void. She couldn't see them yet, couldn't hear anything but wind, but she knew they were there. 15 seconds into the fall, Sullivan appeared on her left, then Reeves on her right, then Kane below and behind. 4 operators falling together, a formation held by skill and faith, and the shared understanding that separation meant death. The altimeter on her wrist glowed green in the darkness. 26,000 feet, 24,000. 22,000, falling at 120 miles per hour. The earth rushing up to meet them. 18,000 feet, 16,000, 14,000. The darkness below began to take shape. Terrain features emerging from blackness. Mountains, valleys, the thin ribbon of a road cutting through wilderness. 10,000 feet, 8,000, 6,000. Thorne's hand moved to her ripcord handle. 4,000 feet, 3,500. Now, she pulled. The pilot chute deployed, dragged the main canopy out of her pack. She felt the tug, the opening shock, the sudden deceleration from terminal velocity to 15 miles per hour. Above her, the MC-6 canopy blossomed. Black fabric against black sky, nearly invisible. Around her, 3 more canopies deployed. All good, all flying, all tracking toward the landing zone. They flew in formation through the darkness, silent, invisible. 4 ghosts descending toward hostile territory. 200 feet, 100, 50. Thorne flared the canopy. Touchdown. Soft. Feet, knees, roll. Combat landing. Up immediately. Hand on her rifle. Scanning for threats. Nothing. Clear. Sullivan landed 10 meters to her left. Then Reeves. Then Kane. Rally point. 30 seconds. Weapons hot. Perimeter established. They'd made it. Phase 1 complete. Now came the hard part. 8 kilometers of darkness lay between them and the compound. 8 kilometers of hostile territory where one mistake meant mission failure. One sound meant compromise. One wrong step meant death. They moved through the forest like smoke, night vision turning the darkness into shades of green. Each step placed carefully, each movement measured. Sound discipline absolute. The forest was silent except for wind through the trees, the distant call of some night bird, the crunch of frozen ground under their boots. An hour into the movement, Sullivan raised his fist. Freeze. Everyone dropped to the ground, became part of the terrain. Shadows among shadows. Thorne heard it then. Voices, distant but getting closer. She activated her night vision, scanned the forest ahead. 4 hostiles, moving along a trail 200 meters to their east. Weapons slung. Casual, not expecting contact. One of them laughed at something. The sound carried through the cold air. They were close enough that Thorne could smell cigarette smoke drifting between the trees. She pressed herself flat against the frozen ground, controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became nothing, a piece of the landscape, invisible. The patrol passed within 50 meters, so close she could hear their conversation, Russian, probably, or one of the regional dialects. She didn't speak it well enough to understand the words, but the tone was clear. Bored, cold, wishing they were somewhere else. They had no idea 4 American operators lay within rifle range. Thorne waited. 10 minutes after the last sound faded, making absolutely certain they were gone. Then she moved again, the others following, silent, disciplined, professional. Another hour of movement through darkness in frozen forest. Then the compound appeared through the trees. Guard towers, perimeter fence, roving patrols, everything matching the satellite imagery, everything feeling wrong. Thorne checked her watch. 01:45 hours, 15 minutes until shift change. She turned to her team. Hand signals only now. Even whispered words could carry in the cold air. Sullivan moved first, disappearing into the darkness toward his sniper position 400 meters north. Within seconds, he was invisible, a ghost among ghosts. Reeves and Kane moved to their security positions 200 meters south. Reeves set up his medical station behind cover. Kane began prepping charges, his movements mechanical, precise, betraying nothing of the turmoil inside. Thorne moved to the drainage culvert, 28 inches in diameter, barely large enough for her with minimal kit. She stripped down to essentials, rifle across her back, sidearm on her hip, Knife strapped to her calf, radio on her vest. Nothing else. Everything that mattered reduced to what she could carry through a pipe barely wider than her shoulders. 158. 2 minutes. She stared at the covert entrance, at the darkness beyond, at the point of no return. I'm coming, brother. Hold on. 200. Shift change began, guards moving, attention divided, the brief window of opportunity. Thorne entered the culvert. The space was claustrophobic, dark, wet, the smell of concrete and rust in stagnant water. She low-crawled through the tunnel, pulling herself forward with her elbows, rifle dragging beneath her, every sound amplified in the enclosed space. 30 meters through absolute darkness, her world reduced to the pipe around her, the cold water soaking through her gear, the sound of her own breathing. The knowledge that if she got stuck, if the intelligence was wrong, if the pipe was blocked, she'd die here, alone, in the dark, 30 meters from salvation. She kept moving. The pipe opened into a maintenance area beneath the main compound. She emerged, checked her surroundings. Clear. Good intel so far. That worried her. Intel was never this good. She moved through the basement level, past machinery, past storage rooms, following the mental map she'd memorized from satellite imagery and intercepted blueprints. The cell blocks were one level up. She found the stairs, moved up slowly, knife in hand now, silent as death itself. Top of the stairs, long corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, cell doors every 10 feet. She moved down the corridor, checking each cell through the small windows. Most were empty. Then the last cell on the right. She looked through the window, and there he was. Garrett Calloway sat on the concrete floor, back against the wall. He was thin, emaciated. His face was bruised. His hands showed signs of torture, scars on his forearms, burn marks on his chest visible through his torn shirt. 4 years of hell written on his body. But his eyes were alert, alive, unbroken. He looked up, saw her face in the window. His eyes widened. Disbelief, recognition, hope. She worked the lock. 30 seconds of careful manipulation with the pick she'd carried in her vest. The door opened. She entered. Garrett tried to stand, couldn't quite manage it. His legs gave out beneath him. She knelt beside him. Phantom. His voice was rough, damaged, but there was wonder in it. You came. Always. She helped him to his feet. He leaned against her, barely able to support his own weight. Can you walk? He tried, managed 2 steps before his legs buckled. I'll carry you if I have to, but we need to move. Now. Phantom. Something in his voice made her stop. She looked at him, saw the fear replacing hope. He grabbed her arm. This is a trap. The words hit her like ice water. What? Volkov knew someone would come. He's been waiting for a rescue attempt. The compound, it's designed to lure in rescue teams and eliminate them. Her mind raced. The good intel, the perfect satellite imagery, the convenient drainage culvert. It all made sense now. They'd been set up. She keyed her radio. All units, mission is compromised. We're walking into an ambush. Abort! 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 The radio crackled, then Kane's voice, tight with something that wasn't quite right. Phantom, we can't abort. We're already committed. Thorne's blood ran cold. Kane, what did you do? Silence on the radio, heavy, damning, then quietly broken. They have Lily, my daughter, 2 months. I didn't have a choice. The corridor lights blazed bright, alarms wailed, red lights flashing like the inside of hell itself. The PA system crackled to life. A voice echoed through the speakers, calm, accented, amused. Welcome, Phantom. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Who sent you? The Admiral? Your guilt? Or perhaps destiny itself? Colonel Victor Volkov, The man who'd held Garrett for 4 years. The man who'd broken 3 operators before him. The man who'd been waiting for this moment. I've been expecting you. 4 years of patience. 4 years of preparation. And now, finally, the legend comes to me. His voice carried satisfaction, anticipation. Let's see if ghosts can bleed. The trap had been sprung. Guards flooded the corridor, weapons raised, shouting in Russian. Thorne grabbed Garrett, half carrying him toward the emergency exit. She fired without looking, suppressed rounds, double tap to center mass. First guard down, second guard down, third guard taking cover. She kept moving. 20 meters to the exit, 15, 10. Behind them, more guards poured into the corridor, the entire compound mobilizing. She keyed her radio while moving. Sullivan, status? Taking fire, 4 hostiles down, but they've got me bracketed. Can't hold this position long. Reeves, respond. Static, then Kane's voice, broken, ashamed. They've got Reeves. I'm sorry, Phantom. God, I'm so sorry. Thorne's jaw tightened. 2 men down or compromised already. Garrett barely able to walk. The entire compound alert. But she'd been in worse situations. She'd survived worse odds. She reached the exit, kicked the door open. Behind them, more guards. Ahead, chaos. Then the building shook. A massive explosion ripped through the compound. The floor buckled beneath her feet. Ceiling tiles crashed down. Lights flickered and died. Secondary detonations followed. Fuel tanks, ammunition storage. The sound of collapsing masonry. Kane had delivered. The guards in the corridor scattered, responding to the new threat. Confused, disorganized. Thorne reached the exit, burst through into the cold night air. Outside was absolute chaos. Fire, smoke, guards running in every direction, the compound burning. She moved, Garrett stumbling beside her. 50 meters to the perimeter fence. 40, 30. Then a figure stepped out of the smoke, blocking their path. Colonel Viktor Volkov stood there, calm despite the compound burning around him. Tactical gear, sidearm holstered at his hip, hands relaxed at his sides. The eye of the storm. Captain Ashford. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. The Phantom. Finally, we meet face to face. Thorne pushed Garrett behind her, raised her rifle. Step aside, Colonel. Or what? You'll shoot me? He spread his arms wide. Go ahead. My men will cut you down before my body hits the ground. And then your precious Garrett dies anyway. Slow, painful, watching you bleed out beside him. He tilted his head. But you won't shoot, because you need something from me. What I need is for you to move. So American, so direct, no subtlety, no appreciation for the game. He took a step closer. Do you want to know how I knew you were coming? How I knew every detail of your plan? Thorne said nothing, but her finger moved to the trigger. Kane delivered you. Predictable. Grief makes men weak. Children are such effective leverage. He paused. Let that sink in. But he wasn't my only source, Captain. The words hung in the air like a threat. Admiral Latimer, 42 years of service. Cold War Berlin, Desert Storm, Afghanistan. Such a distinguished career. Thorne's blood chilled. We were enemies once. Then the world changed. Old warriors recognize each other across battlefields. Information flows between those who understand the game. You're lying. Am I? He smiled, cold, calculating. How do you think I knew about Sentinel, about Syria, about you? He leaned forward slightly. Your mentor compromised you. Not deliberately, perhaps, not knowingly, but old soldiers leave traces. And men like me, we know how to follow those traces back to their source. The doubt he planted was deliberate, precise, designed to fracture trust at the moment she needed it most. The question you should ask yourself, Captain, can you trust him when this is over? Or are you just another piece in a game played by men who've been moving shadows since before you were born? Thorne lowered her rifle. You talk too much, Colonel. She attacked, fast, faster than he expected. Her first strike caught him in the throat, not hard enough to crush his larynx, hard enough to stun. He staggered back, but he was better than she expected, decades better. He recovered, blocked her follow-up strike, countered with a palm heel to her sternum. Air exploded from her lungs. She rolled backward, came up, knife slashing. He caught her wrist, twisted. The knife clattered away. They crashed into the burning building's wall, heat scorching her back, his hands around her throat, squeezing, vision darkening, seconds from unconsciousness. She thought of Sullivan, Reeves, Kane, Garrett waiting 4 years. Not like this. Her knee came up hard. He grunted, grip loosening. She broke free, grabbed a piece of burning debris, swung it into his face. He staggered. She swept his legs. He went down. This time she didn't give him a chance to recover. She was on him before he could move. Knife retrieved, blade at his throat. Yield. He laughed, blood on his teeth. Kill me. It won't matter. My men will. Your men are dying. Your compound is burning. And in 30 seconds, my sniper is going to put a round through every hostile in sight. She pressed the knife harder. A thin line of blood appeared. Yield or die, your choice. Something flickered in his eyes, the first crack in his confidence. You won't kill me. You need information. About Kane's daughter. About your admiral. About... You're right. I do need information. She leaned close. But I don't need you conscious to get it. She hit him hard. The hilt of the knife against his temple. Precisely calculated. Enough force to ensure unconsciousness. Not enough to kill. He went limp. She stood, grabbed Garrett. Move! Now! They reached the fence. Thorne cut through with wire cutters, pulled Garrett through the gap. On the other side, Sullivan materialized from the darkness. His face was grim. Reeves didn't make it. They got him before Kane's distraction. Thorne absorbed the blow, filed it away. Grief could wait. Survival came first. Kane? Don't know. Last transmission was the explosions. 2 men down, 1 wounded prisoner, 30 hostiles pursuing, 15 kilometers to the coast. The math wasn't good, but she'd beaten worse odds before. We move. 15 clicks overland. Stay ahead of pursuit. Sullivan, your rear security. He nodded, checked his rifle, chambered around. They started moving into the forest. Behind them, the compound burned. Ahead, darkness and distance, and the thin hope of extraction. 2 kilometers into the movement, Sullivan stopped. I'm staying. Thorne turned. No. Not asking permission, Captain. They're organizing pursuit. Someone needs to slow them down. We don't leave people. You're not leaving me. His voice was steady, certain. I'm choosing. That's what you taught me. That's what this whole mission is about. Choosing to stand for something that matters. He looked at her, something like peace in his eyes. Get him home, Phantom. Finish the mission. That's what instructors do. Thorne wanted to argue, wanted to order him to follow, wanted to find a way that didn't cost another life. But she knew he was right. Sullivan took up position behind a fallen tree. Perfect cover, perfect field of fire, perfect place to make a last stand. Go, Captain. That's an order. She hesitated for one more heartbeat. Then she went. The sound of precision rifle fire echoed behind them. Each shot measured, deliberate. One less pursuer. One more second of life bought with skill and sacrifice. The firing continued for 5 minutes. Then it stopped. And Thorne knew they'd lost another brother to the darkness. The forest swallowed them whole. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Trees became shadows. Shadows became threats. Every sound magnified. Every movement scrutinized. The weight of survival measured in seconds and heartbeats, and the distance between where they were and where they needed to be. Thorn half-carried Garrett through the undergrowth, his arm draped over her shoulders, his weight against her side. Each step a negotiation between his failing strength and her determination not to leave him behind. Not again, never again. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit, distant but growing closer. Voices shouting commands, engines starting, the organized chaos of men who knew these mountains and wouldn't stop until they found what they were hunting. Sullivan had bought them time. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. He'd bought it with his life. The debt could never be repaid, only honored. They moved through a ravine, following a frozen streambed. The ice cracked under their boots, each sound like a gunshot in the silence. But it was the fastest route. Speed mattered more than stealth now. Garrett stumbled, went down to one knee. Thorn caught him, pulled him back up. "Stay with me, Chief. 15 clicks. We can make 15 clicks." "Leave me." His voice was barely a whisper. "You can move faster alone." "Not happening." "Phantom, I'm slowing you down. They're going to catch us because of me." She stopped, turned to face him. Even in the darkness, even with his face gaunt and bruised, she could see the man she'd served with. The operator who'd never quit, who'd held out for 4 years against torture that broke stronger men. "You listen to me, Garrett Calloway. I came back for you. I burned bridges. I risked everything. And I'm not leaving this forest without you." She gripped his shoulders. "Sullivan died buying us time. Reeves is gone. Kane's sacrifice gave us a chance. You don't get to quit on them. You don't get to quit on me." Something flickered in his eyes. A spark. A memory of who he used to be. "Hoo-yah," he whispered. "Damn right, now move." They moved. Another kilometer through darkness and cold. Garrett's breathing grew labored, his steps more uncertain. But he kept moving. One foot in front of the other, driven by will alone. The streambed opened into a valley. Moonlight broke through the clouds, enough to see by, enough to be seen by. Thorn checked her GPS. 8 kilometers to the coast. 8 kilometers through hostile territory with pursuit closing. She keyed her radio. "Rattlesnake, this is Phantom." 8 clicks from exfil. 2 operators, 1 wounded. Heavy pursuit. Static. Then Admiral Latimer's voice, strained with tension and barely controlled fear. "Phantom, understood. RIB is standing by, but we're tracking multiple hostile units converging on your position." "We'll get there." "Thorn?" She heard it in his voice, the weight of command, the calculation of acceptable losses, the question he was afraid to ask. "Can you make it?" "We'll get there, Admiral. Have that boat ready." She cut the transmission before he could argue. They continued through the valley. Every minute counted. Every meter gained meant 1 less meter with hostiles at their back. An hour before dawn, they reached a river. The water moved fast between banks of ice and stone. Not wide, maybe 20 meters, but deep. The kind of crossing that killed unprepared soldiers. Garrett stared at it, defeated. "I can't." "You will." Thorn tied paracord between them. 30 feet of line, insurance against the current. Together or not at all. She stepped into the water first. The cold hit instantly. Breath-stealing, muscle-seizing. But she trained in water colder than this. Norway, Alaska, the North Sea. She could do this. Garrett followed, each step uncertain. By the time they reached midstream, he was gasping, the cold overwhelming his already weakened system. Then his legs gave out. He went under. The paracord snapped taut, pulling Thorn off balance. She planted her feet against the riverbed, pulled with everything she had. Garrett surfaced, choking, thrashing. "I've got you, I've got you." She hauled him forward, inch by brutal inch, fighting the current, fighting the cold, fighting the whisper in her mind that said this was too much, that the river would take them both. Her feet found the far bank. She pulled Garrett onto frozen ground, both of them shaking violently. hypothermia setting in fast. She stripped his wet clothes, wrapped him in her thermal blanket, activated chemical heat packs, placed them against his core, his neck, anywhere blood flow could carry warmth. Then she changed into her spare clothes, damp but better than wet. Garrett's shaking intensified, his lips blue, his eyes unfocused. "Stay with me, Chief. We're almost there." Cold. The word barely formed. So cold. "I know, but you've survived worse. 4 years in that cell. 4 years of hell. You're not dying from a river crossing." She rubbed his arms, trying to generate heat through friction. "Talk to me. Tell me something. Anything. Stay conscious." "Why?" His voice was distant, fading. "Why come back for me?" "Because you're worth it. Because we don't leave brothers behind. Because I made a mistake 4 years ago, and I've spent every day since trying to make it right." "Prophet. Prophet's gone. Cole's gone. But you're here. And I'll be damned if I lose you after coming this far." She pulled him to his feet. 3 more kilometers, that's all. 3 clicks, and we're home. Behind them, headlights appeared on the far side of the river. Vehicles. Multiple. The pursuit had caught up. No time for rest. No time for warmth. They moved. Dawn broke as they climbed the final ridge. Gray light spreading across the landscape, revealing their position, eliminating their concealment. Below, the coast, gray sand, waves crashing, and offshore, barely visible through the morning mist, a rigid, inflatable boat. Salvation. Thorne keyed her radio. "Rattlesnake, this is Phantom. We have visual on exfil point. Coming in hot, heavy pursuit, 300 meters behind." "Phantom, boat is inbound. 30 seconds. Hold position and prepare for immediate extraction." She turned to look back. Hostile forces burst from the tree line. 20 men, maybe more. Weapons raised, closing fast. She positioned Garrett behind a rock. Raised her rifle. Began firing. Controlled bursts. Center mass. Professional. Efficient. First hostile down. Second down. They returned fire. Rounds cracked past her head, impacted the rock, threw up sprays of stone fragments. She kept firing. Magazine empty. Reload. Continue firing. Third hostile down. The RIB hit the beach. Navy crew providing covering fire. Heavy weapons. M240 machine gun. Suppressing the hostiles, forcing them to take cover. "Load up! Move! Move! Move!" Thorne hauled Garrett to his feet, half carried him toward the boat. 50 meters. 40. 30. A round caught her shoulder. Left side, just below the collarbone. Pain exploded through her body. White hot, all-consuming. Her vision tunneled. Gray edges closing in. She stumbled, went down to one knee. Garrett grabbed her good arm. "Phantom!" For a moment, one terrible moment, she thought this was it. The mission would fail. Garrett would die on this beach. Sullivan and Reeves and Kane would have died for nothing. Then something hardened inside her. Something forged over 8 years of refusing to quit. She stood, kept moving. "Not today," she whispered. "Not here." 20 meters, another round. This one passed so close she felt the heat. Heard the crack as it broke the sound barrier next to her ear. 10 meters. Strong hands grabbed her, pulled her into the boat, pulled Garrett in behind her. The coxswain gunned the engines. The boat lurched forward, acceleration throwing everyone backward. An RPG launcher appeared on the beach. Hostile shouldering the weapon, aiming. "RPG! Evasive!" The coxswain turned hard. The boat heeling over, water spraying over the gunnels. The RPG launched. Trail of smoke. Warhead tracking toward them. It exploded 3 meters behind the boat. Close enough that the blast wave lifted the stern. Close enough that shrapnel peppered the inflatable tubes. But not close enough. They were at critical condition. Severe malnutrition. Dehydration. Multiple injuries consistent with prolonged torture, but stable. He'll make it. Thorne closed her eyes. Sullivan's face appeared in her mind. Then Reeves. Then Kane's tortured expression as he made the call that betrayed them all. 3 men who gave everything. 3 men who weren't coming home. The submarine appeared ahead. USS Oklahoma City. Black shape rising from black water. The RIB pulled alongside, transferred to the sub, down the hatch, into safety, into warmth, into the artificial light and recycled air of a machine that could take them home. The submarine dove, disappeared into the deep, taking them away from hostile territory, away from pursuit, away from the mission that had cost so much. Garrett was transferred to medical immediately. The corpsman worked on him with practiced efficiency. IVS, monitoring equipment, thermal regulation. A medic worked on Thorne's shoulder, cleaned the wound, sutured entry and exit, bandaged it, loaded her with antibiotics and pain medication. You need rest, ma'am. I need to see the Admiral. Ma'am, you've lost blood. You're hypothermic. I need to see the Admiral. Now. She found Latimer in the captain's quarters. He was on a secure line, his voice low, tense, having the conversation no admiral wanted to have. Casualty notification. He looked up when she entered, saw her arm in the sling, the exhaustion in her eyes. The weight unauthorized. Are you going to acknowledge what they did? Put their names on the wall? Tell their families the truth? Latimer was quiet. I'll do what I can, within the constraints of protecting your career, your reputation, the precious secrets that matter more than the men who died keeping them. Her voice was hard, angry, the pain and exhaustion stripping away any pretense of military courtesy. Volkov said you compromised Sentinel, that you left traces, that he knew about Syria because of information you leaked. Latimer's face went pale. I never deliberately, I know, not deliberately, not knowingly, but you made calls, pulled favors, traded information with old enemies who became old friends when the politics changed. She leaned forward despite the pain in her shoulder. And because of that, Kane's daughter got kidnapped. Reeves got killed. Sullivan died covering our retreat. 3 men paid the price for your mistakes. Latimer absorbed the accusation, the weight of it settling on shoulders that had carried command for 42 years. You're right. The admission came quietly, honestly. Berlin, 1987. I traded HUMINT on Soviet naval movements for intel on their submarine fleet. My contact was GRU. I thought he defected. Turned out he was playing both sides. He paused. When Volkov went private after the USSR fell, he inherited that network, including files on American operators his old contacts had tracked. Your name was in those files, Thorne. From Syria, from Sentinel. The specific details made it real, made it undeniable. When Sentinel was compromised 4 years ago, I made a choice. I erased you to protect you. I thought I was saving you, but maybe I was just saving myself from having to look at you and remember what I'd cost our team. Silence filled the small room. Then Thorne spoke, her voice softer now, less anger, I keep my promises, Admiral, all of them. Thorne, this is beyond. Find me a helicopter, someone who can fly it. That's all I need. Latimer looked at her, saw the determination, the fire that 4 years of hell hadn't extinguished, the same quality that made her survive when others broke. He reached into his desk, pulled out a small box, opened it. Inside was a gold trident pin. The real one, not the tattoo, not the symbol. The actual insignia that marks someone as having earned their place among the elite. This was meant for you 8 years ago, before Sentinel was buried, before I made the choices that cost us everything. He held it out. You've earned it, twice over, 3 times over. She took it, felt the weight, the history, the meaning. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Captain, for reminding me what honor means. He paused. What happens to me now? What do you mean? Court-martial hearing in 3 weeks. I'll take full responsibility. Unauthorized operation. Misuse of resources. They'll strip my rank. Probably prison time. And Sentinel's exposure? Contained. I made sure the operation looked like my rogue action. The other operators are protected. He almost smiled. One last thing I can do right. Admiral. It's worth it, Captain. Garrett's alive. That's worth everything. 72 hours later, the submarine surfaced in United States territorial waters. A helicopter waited on the deck, medical teams standing by. Garrett was transferred first, still critical, still weak, but alive, conscious, aware. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, he reached out, grabbed Thorne's hand. You came back. Always. Cole would be proud. Prophet would be proud. They're not here, but you are, and that matters. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Phantom. Thank you for not giving up. They loaded him into the helicopter, rotors spinning up, lifting off toward the mainland, toward hospitals and recovery and the long road back to whatever normal meant after 4 years of hell. Thorne stood on the deck, arm in a sling, exhaustion written on every line of her body. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She turned to Latimer. The helicopter, the pilot. Already arranged, Lieutenant Mackenzie, Gulf War, knows how to keep his mouth shut. Weapons? Whatever you need. Then let's finish this. The helicopter insertion was clean, fast, precise. The secondary site was exactly where Volkov's files indicated. 30 kilometers from the main compound. Small facility, minimal security. 2 guards at the entrance. Thorne took them both down. Non-lethal, controlled force. They'd live to answer questions later, but they wouldn't be calling for backup. She moved through the facility, room by room, systematic, professional. Found Lily Kane in the 3rd room, 8 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, terrified but unharmed. The girl looked up as Thorne entered, fear in her eyes, expecting more pain, more suffering. Thorne knelt down, removed her tactical mask, tried to look less threatening despite the sling and the blood on her gear. Lily? My name is Thorne. I'm a friend of your daddy's. I'm taking you home. The girl's eyes widened. Where's Daddy? The question hit Thorne like a physical blow. She thought about Kane, about his final transmission, about the explosions, about the sacrifice he'd made to redeem the betrayal he never wanted to commit. Your daddy is a hero, Lily. He saved a lot of people, good people. He wanted me to tell you that he loves you very much. Is he coming? No, sweetheart, he can't come. But he made sure you'd be safe. That's what daddies do. They protect their children, no matter what. She wrapped a blanket around the girl, picked her up, carried her out of that place of darkness and fear. The helicopter flight back was quiet. Lily slept, exhausted, safe for the first time in 2 months. Thorne watched her sleep, thought about Kane, about the impossible choice he'd faced, about the redemption he'd found at the end. Some debts could only be paid in blood, but some promises could still be kept. 3 days later, Lily appeared on her mother's doorstep. The woman opened the door, saw her daughter, collapsed to her knees, pulling the girl into her arms, sobbing, holding her like she'd never let go. She never saw the figure walking away down the street, never knew who brought her daughter home, never knew about the phantom who kept impossible promises. 6 months later, Naval Base Coronado, Hell Week in progress. A young woman struggled through surf torture, 22 years old, Bryn McAllister, face pale from hypothermia, body shaking, mind screaming to quit. The instructors were in her face, yelling, demanding she give up. Ring the bell, McAllister. It's warm. It's dry. All you have to do is quit. She was close, so close to breaking. her hand reaching toward the bell, toward relief, toward the end of pain. From the beach, a figure watched. A woman in civilian clothes, leather jacket, coffee in hand, face partially obscured by a hood. Bryn looked up. Through the spray and the cold and the exhaustion, their eyes met across the distance. The stranger gave the slightest nod. "Keep going. You've got this." Something shifted in Bryn's eyes. Some reserve of strength she didn't know she had. She stood up straighter, looked the instructor in the eye. "I'm not quitting, instructor. Not today. Not ever." The instructor nodded. Respect, grudging, but real. "Then get back in formation, candidate." The stranger on the beach turned to leave. An old SEAL stood nearby, 60-something, Gulf War veteran. Decades of experience written on his weathered face. He'd been watching the stranger watch the candidate. A younger instructor approached. "Who is that?" The old SEAL was quiet for a moment. "Nobody you need to know about, but that woman right there, she's proof that the best operators are the ones history forgets." He watched the figure disappear into the morning fog. On the other side of the base, a small park. Lily Kane played on the swings, 8 years old now, laughing, running, climbing like a child who'd never known fear, never known captivity. Her mother sat on a nearby bench, watching her daughter with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd lost something precious and gotten it back. She'd asked questions, tried to find out who brought Lily home, filed reports with police, with social services, with anyone who would listen. But there were no answers, no witnesses, no surveillance footage, just a little girl appearing on a doorstep like a miracle. From a distance, a woman watched. Thorne Ashford, Phantom, the operator who didn't exist. She watched Lily play for a long moment, watched her be a child again, watched the promise kept manifest in innocence restored. Then she turned and walked away, into the fog rolling in from the Pacific, into obscurity, into the life she'd chosen. She thought about Cole, about the way he'd stepped in front of that RPG, about the sacrifice that gave her life. She thought about Prophet, about his last words, about the forgiveness in his eyes even as she left him behind. She thought about Garrett, recovering in a hospital somewhere, slowly finding his way back to himself, to life, to purpose. She thought about Sullivan, about his last stand, about the seconds he bought with his life. She thought about Reeves, about his skepticism transformed to respect, about dying before proving he believed. She thought about Cain, about impossible choices, about redemption found in sacrifice, about a father's love stronger than fear, the price of honor, the cost of keeping promises, the weight of being someone who would never quit, never ring the bell, never leave a teammate behind. She was Phantom. She was Sentinel. She was the operator who didn't exist but who would always come when called. And somewhere out there, someone else was waiting. Someone who needed a ghost to believe in. Someone whose hope was fading. Someone whose time was running out. She'd find them. She always did. The fog grew thicker, dense, white as snow, cold as memory. The beach fell silent except for the eternal rhythm of waves. Thorne Ashford disappeared into the mist completely. No trace left behind. No footprints in the sand. No evidence she'd ever been there. In a hospital room in Virginia, Garrett Calloway woke from surgery. Physical therapy ahead, psychological recovery, the long road back from 4 years of hell. But he was alive, and somewhere in his morphine-hazed mind, he remembered a face in a window. A door opening, a voice saying, "I'm getting you out." He remembered being carried through fire, through water, through darkness. He remembered a woman who refused to quit, who refused to leave him behind, who paid every price asked in some that weren't. When the doctors asked what kept him alive for 4 years, what sustained him when torture broke other men, he had only one answer. "I knew she'd come. Somewhere, somehow, I knew the Phantom would come." They thought he was delirious, but he knew the truth. Some promises were stronger than pain, stronger than fear, stronger than death itself. And the phantoms who kept those promises shaped history without ever appearing in it. The sun broke through the fog over Coronado, golden light spilling across the Pacific, illuminating the beach where generations of warriors had been forged. The waves continued their eternal rhythm. The candidates continued their eternal struggle. And somewhere in the light and shadow between legend and truth, a woman walked alone, not seeking glory, not seeking recognition, not seeking anything but the quiet satisfaction of promises kept and debts repaid. She was Thorn Ashford. She was Phantom. She was the ghost who walked. And she would walk forever, through darkness and fire, through pain and sacrifice, through every mission that mattered and every promise that demanded keeping. Because some people were called to serve not in the light, but in the shadows, not in the history books, but in the unwritten pages between them, not in the stories told, but in the silences where truth lived. She disappeared into those silences now, into the fog, into the mission, into the eternal watch. And somewhere, someone else was waiting, someone who needed a phantom to believe in. She'd find them. She always did. The fog swallowed her completely. The beach was silent. The waves rolled on, and the phantom walked.